All right, let's talk about plants. We're not just going to look at the pretty leaves and flowers today. No, we're going deep inside to uncover their hidden architecture. We're about to explore the internal blueprint that lets a tiny little seed become a massive, towering tree. I mean, think about it. We see plants literally every single day. But how do they really work? What's the internal scaffolding that allows a giant sequoia to reach for the sky or a simple blade of grass to bend in the wind without snapping? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out. Every big structure has to start somewhere, right? There's a plan, there are construction sites. For plants, it all kicks off with their growth engines. These are really specialized zones called meristems. So, what's a meristem? Honestly, just think of them as the plant's permanent construction sites. They're these amazing pockets of cells that basically stay forever young. They never really grow up. Their one job is to just keep dividing and churning out all the new cells that are going to become leaves, stems, roots, you name it. This is where all the action begins. And this growth, it happens in two main directions. First, you've got your primary meristems. These are usually right at the tips of the shoots and roots, and they're all about adding length, making the plant taller and the roots longer. But then you've got the lateral meristems. These are shaped like cylinders, and they focus on increasing girth, making the plant wider and more robust as it gets older. Now it gets even more interesting. Even these tissues that make the plant wider aren't all created equal. Some of them are primary. They were there from the get-go, part of the initial blueprint. But others are secondary. They actually pop up later in the plant's life to add even more width and strength. This idea, this difference between primary and secondary growth, is absolutely crucial. Keep that in your back pocket. Okay, so if the meristems are the construction sites, what are they building with? Well, they're constantly producing the raw building materials. In biology, we call these materials tissues, and these are the fundamental blocks that build the entire plant structure. The most common stuff is what we call ground tissue. You can think of it as the versatile filler that makes up the bulk of the plant. It's not just one thing, though. It's made of a few different cell types. Some of them are the workhorses, handling metabolism and storage, while others are pure specialists, dedicated entirely to structural support. Let's really zoom in on one of those support tissues because it's a total beast. It's called sclerenchyma. And really, it is the plant's structural steel. You ever wonder what makes a nutshell so incredibly hard or a woody stem so tough and rigid? Yeah, you're looking at it. So what's its secret weapon? It all comes down to its cell walls. They are ridiculously thick and reinforced with this super tough, rigid polymer called lignin. It basically turns each individual cell into a tiny little pillar of concrete. It's all about strength. Okay, so we've got growth. And we've got support. Great. But any good building needs plumbing, right? How on earth does a plant get water from the soil all the way up to the topmost leaf? And then how does it move all that sugary food it makes back down to the roots? Well, that happens in the vascular system, the plant's plumbing. The xylem is the tissue that carries water. And even here, you find different kinds of pipes. You've got tracheids, which are these long, single cells, and then you have vessels, which are much wider because they're built from many cells stacked together end to end, kind of like sections of a real pipe. Now, for food transport, plants use a different tissue called phloem. And here's a fascinating little detail, a fun fact for you. One of the key cell types in phloem is completely missing in a huge group of plants called the monocots. Now, just remember that little tidbit, because it's a huge clue that helps explain some of the major differences we're about to get into. All right, we've gone from the growth engines to the internal plumbing. Now let's move to the outside, to the protective layer. Every plant needs a skin to shield it from the world, and that's the job of the epidermis. Now, a super important feature of this skin are its breathing pores, the stomata. But it's not just a simple hole. The whole thing is called the stomatal apparatus. It's this complex unit that includes the pore itself, the two guard cells that cleverly open and close it, and even the specialized subsidiary cells around them that provide support. It's a beautifully engineered little machine for gas exchange. The epidermis also grows these little outgrowths, but what they are and what they do completely changes depending on where you are on the plant. Down in the roots, you get these tiny single-celled root hairs that are perfect for absorbing water. But up on the shoot, you get trichomes. They're usually multicellular, and they can be fuzzy or sticky or even sharp, and they're usually all about protection. And this brings us to a really simple but absolutely critical rule of plant architecture. The shoot, the stems and leaves, is covered in a waxy layer called a cuticle to stop it from drying out. But you will never find that cuticle on the roots. And why? Well, it's just common sense, right? A waxy, waterproof layer would totally stop the root from doing its number one job, absorbing water. Okay, we've seen the growth engines, the building materials, and the outer skin. Now for the really cool part. Let's see how all those pieces get put together in two fundamentally different architectural plans, the dicot stem versus the monocot stem. So right under the skin, we see a huge difference. In a typical dicot stem, that supportive layer is made of something called collenchyma, which provides flexible strength. Think of a celery stalk. But in a monocot stem, it's made of that rigid structural steel, sclerenchyma, that gives it a much stiffer, more rigid kind of support. And here it is, the classic giveaway. It's all about the plumbing. In a dicot stem, those vascular bundles are arranged in this neat, orderly ring. And it's this organized layout that allows for that secondary growth we talked about, the ability to get wider. In a monocot, though, it's chaos. The bundles are just scattered all over the place, randomly, throughout the stem. And here's the monocot's signature move. Each and every one of those scattered plumbing bundles is encased in its very own protective sleeve of that super tough sclerenchyma. It's like running reinforced pipes through the entire structure, which adds a ton of rigidity. But the story doesn't stop at the stem. The differences in these architectural plans continue all the way down below the ground. So let's follow the comparison and see how the blueprints for dicot and monocot roots are also totally different. First, though, let's start with a similarity, something that's true for pretty much all roots. Unlike in stems, the vascular bundles in all roots are arranged in this cool, radial, almost star-like pattern. It's a universal design that just works really well for providing strength and efficiency for life underground. But that's kind of where the similarities end. The differences are still huge. For instance, in a dicot root, the very center, the pith, is either tiny or it's not even there. In a monocot root, it's huge and well-developed. And remember that special tissue for secondary growth, the vascular cambium? In a dicot root, it forms later in life. It's completely secondary. In a monocot root, well, it just doesn't happen at all. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that all these tiny, seemingly nerdy anatomical details, they add up, they matter. The internal blueprint literally determines what a plant can do and what it can become. A tree, which is a dicot, has the architecture for secondary growth. It can get wider and stronger year after year for hundreds of years. A blade of grass, a monocot, simply can't. Its blueprint is for a totally different kind of life. Makes you wonder, what other secrets are hidden in the architecture of the plants all around us?